The old Ford pickup crunched through the gravel driveway as I pulled up to Grandma Margaret's farmhouse, my breath visible in small puffs against the December cold. Snow dusted the cornfields that stretched endlessly beyond the property line, and the familiar sight of the wraparound porch with its weathered rocking chairs made something tight in my chest finally loosen. 4 months of college in Indianapolis felt like a lifetime when you grew up in a place where the biggest excitement was the annual corn festival. "Evan, honey!" Grandma's voice carried across the yard before I'd even killed the engine. She emerged from the front door, wiping her hands on a flour-dusted apron, her silver hair caught up in the same neat bun she'd worn for as long as I could remember. At 78, she still moved with the purposeful energy of someone half her age. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I grabbed my duffel bag from the truck bed and jogged up the porch steps, catching her in a hug that smelled like cinnamon and vanilla extract. "Missed you, Grandma." "Oh, go on." She swatted at my arm, but her eyes were bright with tears she'd never admit to. "You're just in time. I've got 3 pies in the oven and a turkey that needs tending. Your father's been calling every hour, asking if the dining room's ready for tomorrow's dinner." Before I could respond, Dad's voice boomed from inside the house. "Mom, where did you put the good china? Clara can't find the serving platters." I followed Grandma through the familiar hallway lined with family photos, past the living room where the Christmas trees stood perfectly decorated. No doubt, another of Grandma's solo projects. Dad appeared in the doorway to the dining room, his sleeves rolled up and a measuring tape in his hand. "Evan, good, you're here. We need to figure out seating for 16 people. Mom, did you count the folding chairs in the basement?" "Already brought them up, Daniel. They're in the kitchen." Grandma's voice held the patient tone I had heard her use with him my entire life. 16 people? I raised an eyebrow. "I thought this was just family." "It is family, plus the Hendersons from next door, Mom's book club friends, and Pastor Williams. You know how your father likes to make an impression." Grandma squeezed my shoulder as she passed. I should check those pies. Dad finally looked directly at me, his expression the familiar mix of pride and expectation. "How are finals? You keeping that GPA up? Good networking opportunities this semester?" "Dad, I just walked through the door." Right. Well, get settled. Tomorrow's going to be perfect. I want everything to run smoothly." He turned back to his measurements. "Mom, what time will you have everything ready? The Hendersons are bringing wine, so we'll need to coordinate." "I'll handle it, Daniel." Grandma's voice drifted from the kitchen, along with the sound of oven doors opening and closing. As Dad continued his planning monologue to himself, my younger brother, Luke, appeared at the top of the stairs, his dark hair still mussed from sleep, despite it being nearly noon. "Hey, college boy," he grinned and bounded down to punch my shoulder. "How's the big city treating you?" "Can't complain. How's senior year?" Luke's smile faltered slightly, and he glanced toward the dining room where Dad was now rearranging chairs. "Same as every year around here," he said quietly. Then louder, "Come on, I'll help you get your stuff upstairs." As we climbed the narrow staircase, I caught the scent of roasting turkey and heard Grandma humming softly in the kitchen below. Through the window, the December light was already beginning to fade, casting long shadows across the snow-covered fields. Everything looked exactly the same as when I'd left for college, but something felt different, like coming home to a song played in minor key when you remembered it in major. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Grandma moving around downstairs before dawn. By the time I made it to the kitchen at 7, she already had 3 different mixing bowls going, and the counter dusted with flour like fresh snow. "Morning, honey." She looked up from rolling out pie crust, a strand of silver hair escaping from her bun. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in months. How long have you been up?" Oh, just a little while. She waved a flour-covered hand dismissively. Pies don't bake themselves, and your father wants everything perfect for his guests. The way she said, his guests, made me pause. I poured myself coffee from the pot that was probably her third of the morning and watched her work. Her movements were precise, practiced, the result of decades of feeding a family and half the neighborhood whenever someone needed a casserole or a shoulder to cry on. Can I help with anything? You just enjoy yourself, Evan. You work hard enough at school. She crimped the edges of what looked like her famous apple pie with mechanical precision. Besides, I've got my system down. The door opened again, and Dad appeared with his hair still messy from sleep and his phone already pressed to his ear. No, I said cream tablecloths, not white. There's a difference. He covered the phone and looked at Grandma. Mom, what time will you have the turkey ready? The Hendersons want to know when to bring the wine. Same as always, Daniel, 4 o'clock sharp. Good. And you've got enough chairs set up? Pastor Williams called. He's bringing his wife now, too. I'll manage. Grandma's voice was steady, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Dad continued his planning monologue to himself as my younger brother, Luke, appeared at the top of the stairs, his dark hair still mussed from sleep, despite it being nearly noon. Hey, college boy, he grinned and bounded down to punch my shoulder. How's the big city treating you? Can't complain. How's senior year? Luke's smile faltered slightly, and he glanced toward the dining room where Dad was now rearranging chairs. Same as every year around here, he said quietly. Then louder, come on, I'll help you get your stuff upstairs. As we climbed the narrow staircase, I caught the scent of roasting turkey and heard Grandma humming softly in the kitchen below. Through the window, the December light was already beginning to fade, casting long shadows across the snow-covered fields. Everything looked exactly the same as when I'd left for college, but something felt different, like coming home to a song played in minor key when you remembered it in major. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Grandma moving around downstairs before dawn. By the time I made it to the kitchen at 7, she already had 3 different mixing bowls going and the counter dusted with flour like fresh snow. Morning, honey. She looked up from rolling out pie crust, a strand of silver hair escaping from her bun. Sleep well? Better than I have in months. How long have you been up? Oh, just a little while. She waved a flour-covered hand dismissively. Pies don't bake themselves, and your father wants everything perfect for his guests. The way she said, his guests, made me pause. I poured myself coffee from the pot that was probably her third of the morning and watched her work. Her movements were precise, practiced, the result of decades of feeding a family and half the neighborhood whenever someone needed a casserole or a shoulder to cry on. Can I help with anything? You just enjoy yourself, Evan. You work hard enough at school. She crimped the edges of what looked like her famous apple pie with mechanical precision. Besides, I've got my system down. The door opened again, and Dad appeared with his hair still messy from sleep and his phone already pressed to his ear. No, I said cream tablecloths, not white. There's a difference. He covered the phone and looked at Grandma. Mom, what time will you have the turkey ready? The Hendersons want to know when to bring the wine. Same as every year, Daniel. 4 o'clock sharp. Good. And you've got enough chairs set up? Pastor Williams called. He's bringing his wife now, too. I'll manage. Grandma's voice was steady, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Dad continued his planning monologue to himself. As my younger brother Luke appeared at the top of the stairs, his dark hair still mussed from sleep, despite it being nearly noon. Hey, college boy, he grinned and bounded down to punch my shoulder. How's the big city treating you? Can't complain. How's senior year? Luke's smile faltered slightly, and he glanced toward the dining room where Dad was now rearranging chairs. Same as every year around here, he said quietly. Then louder, come on, I'll help you get your stuff upstairs." As we climbed the narrow staircase, I caught the scent of roasting turkey and heard Grandma humming softly in the kitchen below. Through the window, the December light was already beginning to fade, casting long shadows across the snow-covered fields. Although everything looked exactly the same as when I'd left for college, something felt different, like coming home to a song played in minor key when you remembered it in major. By 3 o'clock, the farmhouse had transformed into a holiday showcase. Dad had spent the morning adjusting place settings and lighting, turning Grandma's cozy dining room into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The smell of roasting turkey filled every corner of the house, competing with the pine scent from the Christmas tree and Grandma's vanilla candles. The first car pulled into the driveway just as I was helping Luke arrange folding chairs around the extended dining table. Through the lace curtains, I watched Aunt May and Uncle Rick emerge from their sedan, May clutching a covered dish and Rick wrestling with what looked like a case of wine. "They're here!" Dad called out, straightening his tie and smoothing down his hair. "Mom, how are we doing in there?" "Just fine, Daniel," came Grandma's voice from the kitchen, accompanied by the sound of oven doors opening and closing. May swept through the front door in a cloud of perfume and holiday cheer, her arms immediately wrapping around me in a hug that smelled like expensive lotion. "Evan, honey, look how handsome you've gotten. College is treating you well." "Hi, Aunt May. Good to see you." "Where's your grandmother? I brought my famous green bean casserole." She held up the covered dish proudly. "Kitchen," I said, pointing the way. I followed them through the house, watching as May bustled into the kitchen where Grandma was basting the turkey with practiced efficiency. "Margaret, oh my goodness, this smells incredible!" May set her casserole on the already crowded counter. "What can I do to help?" "Everything's under control," Grandma replied, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "Just make yourself comfortable in the living room." More cars began arriving, the Hendersons with their wine, Mom's book club friends chattering about their latest read, Pastor Williams and his wife carrying what looked like homemade rolls. Each group brought the same energy, warm greetings, compliments about the house, offers to help that were gently deflected. I found myself gravitating back toward the kitchen, where Grandma moved like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. She pulled rolls from the oven, stirred gravy, mashed potatoes, all while keeping track of 17 different conversations happening throughout the house. Luke appeared beside me, leaning against the doorframe. "She's been at this since before sunrise," he said quietly. "I know. I offered to help, but she always says no." He watched as Grandma transferred the massive turkey to a serving platter that looked almost too heavy for her to manage alone. "Dad's in there telling everyone about his latest project, and she's doing all this by herself." Through the kitchen window, I could see more neighbors walking up the front path, carrying covered dishes and bottles of wine. The house was filling with laughter and holiday warmth, but in the kitchen, Grandma moved in focused solitude, her movements efficient but increasingly weary. "Same as every year," Luke muttered, echoing his words from yesterday, but this time they carried a weight I was finally beginning to understand. "Everyone, dinner is served!" Dad's voice boomed through the house as he stood at the head of the dining table, gesturing grandly toward the feast that had materialized as if by magic. The extended table groaned under the weight of Grandma's work. The golden turkey, mountains of stuffing, creamy mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce that sparkled like rubies in cut glass bowls, and 3 different pies cooling on the sideboard. 17 place settings were arranged with military precision, the good china gleaming under the chandelier that Dad had insisted on polishing this morning. Guests filed in, voices rising in appreciation. "Margaret, this is absolutely stunning! How do you do it every year? Everything smells incredible!" But as everyone found their seats, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. 16 chairs were occupied, everyone except Grandma, who appeared in the doorway carrying a pitcher of gravy, her apron still tied around her waist. "Grandma, sit down," I said, gesturing to the empty chair I'd saved beside me. You've been on your feet all day." She shook her head with a gentle smile. "Oh no, honey, I need to make sure everyone has what they need. I'll eat later." "Mom, come sit," Mom added from across the table, her voice carrying that careful tone she used when trying to smooth over potential awkwardness. "Really, I'm fine," Grandma insisted, already moving around the table, topping off water glasses and adjusting serving spoons. "Everyone just enjoy themselves." Dad cleared his throat. "Don't make a fuss, Evan. Your grandmother likes to fuss over people. It's what she does." His tone was light, dismissive, meant to shut down the conversation in front of the guests. I watched Grandma's face for any reaction, but her expression remained serene, practiced. Only the slight tightening around her eyes betrayed anything at all. Luke tried a different approach, quietly standing and reaching for the gravy pitcher. "Grandma, let me—" Sit, she waved him off. "I've got everything under control." Pastor Williams raised his glass. "Well, before we begin, I think we should acknowledge the incredible woman who made all this possible. Margaret, this is extraordinary." A chorus of agreement rose from the table, glasses lifted in Grandma's direction. She smiled and nodded graciously, but remained standing, one hand resting on the back of Dad's chair, as if she were the hired help receiving thanks from the dinner guests. "Now, let's eat before everything gets cold," she said, deflecting the attention as she always did. As conversations resumed and plates began filling, I found myself watching Grandma move between the kitchen and dining room, refilling bread baskets and checking that everyone had enough of everything. Her movements were fluid, efficient, born of decades of practice. But there was something in her posture, a weariness that seemed to go deeper than physical exhaustion, that I'd never noticed before. She caught my eye and winked. The same reassuring gestures she'd given me countless times throughout my childhood. But this time, instead of comfort, it filled me with an inexplicable sadness. The dinner conversation had settled into a comfortable rhythm of compliments about the food and updates about work, family, and holiday plans. Uncle Rick was telling a story about his latest fishing trip when Pastor Williams turned to Dad with genuine curiosity. "Daniel, business must be going well. I heard you landed that big contract with the shopping center development." "That's right, Pastor. 23 units. Biggest project we've taken on. Should keep the crew busy through next summer." He cut into his turkey with satisfaction. "Course, it helps having a good reputation in the community. People know they can count on Carter Construction." "Well deserved," said Mrs. Henderson, raising her wine glass slightly. "And Margaret, this meal is absolutely divine. I don't know how you manage to pull this off every single year." He chuckled, spearing another piece of turkey. "Oh, Mom's good for something besides baking pies down at the church." He grinned around the table, clearly pleased with what he thought was a harmless joke. A few guests chuckled nervously, the kind of polite laughter that fills awkward spaces. But I felt something cold settle in my stomach as I watched Grandma, who had just emerged from the kitchen carrying a fresh basket of rolls. Her steps slowed almost imperceptibly, and for just a moment her carefully composed expression flickered. It was barely noticeable, a slight tightening around her jaw, a pause that lasted perhaps a heartbeat too long. Then her practiced smile returned, smooth as glass. "More rolls, anyone?" she asked, her voice as warm and steady as ever. But I caught the look in her eyes when they met mine across the table. Not hurt exactly, but something deeper. Recognition, maybe. Or resignation. Mom quickly jumped in, her voice bright and hurried. "The stuffing is incredible this year, Margaret. What's your secret ingredient?" "Just sage from the garden," Grandma replied, setting the basket down near Pastor Williams. "Same recipe I've used for 40 years. Luke had gone very still beside me, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Under his breath, so quietly only I could hear, he muttered, "That was messed up." Dad, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, continued regaling the table with details about his business expansion, how he was thinking of bidding on projects in neighboring counties. "Gotta strike while the iron's hot," he said, cutting his words with the same confidence he used to cut his meat. But as Grandma quietly refilled water glasses around the table, moving with the same graceful efficiency she'd shown all day, I found myself thinking about that momentary crack in her composure. How long had she been swallowing comments like that? How many years of being reduced to someone who was good for something besides baking pies? When she excused herself to check on the coffee, I noticed the way she held herself a little straighter as she walked toward the kitchen, as if gathering invisible armor around her shoulders. I waited 10 minutes before following Grandma into the kitchen, making some excuse about helping with coffee. I found her standing at the sink with her back to me, washing dishes with methodical precision. The dish plates were already stacked in neat piles, and steam rose from the hot water as she worked. "Need help with those?" I asked quietly. "Almost finished." She didn't turn around, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "The coffee's ready on the counter if you want to take it out." Instead of reaching for the coffee pot, I leaned against the counter where I could see her face in profile. "Grandma, what Dad said in there, your father's just proud of his success. He doesn't mean anything by it. But it wasn't okay." She finally looked at me, her hands still submerged in the soapy water. For a moment, the mask she'd worn all evening slipped, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Not hurt, but something closer to weariness. Deep, bone-tired weariness. "You know, Evan, I'd been taking care of this family for 43 years. I've heard worse. That doesn't make it right." She dried her hands on a dish towel, taking her time with each finger. "You know, after your grandfather died, I had to sell my wedding ring to help your father get his business started. He was 25, had big dreams but no capital. I told him it was a loan, but we both knew I'd never see that money again." I stayed quiet, sensing she needed to say this. Over the years, there've been other things. The down payment for his first house, equipment for the business when times were tight. I kept the books for Carter Construction for 3 years without pay. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I've been putting money aside, bit by bit. Been planning some changes for a long time now." "What kind of changes?" She looked out the kitchen window towards the snow-covered fields, her expression distant. "I'm 78 years old, Evan. I've spent my whole life making sure everyone else was comfortable, fed, taken care of. Maybe it's time I took care of myself for once." The way she said it sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the December air seeping through the old windows. "Grandma, what are you thinking about doing?" She turned back to me, and for the first time all day, her smile was genuine. "Something that's going to surprise everyone, I think. But not tonight. Tonight I finish what I started." She picked up the coffee pot. "Come on, dessert won't serve itself." When Grandma and I returned to the dining room with coffee and dessert, the atmosphere had grown even more festive. Uncle Rick was telling jokes that had Pastor Williams chuckling behind his napkin, and the wine had loosened tongues around the table. Dad sat at the head like a king surveying his kingdom, clearly pleased with how the evening was unfolding. "Ah, perfect timing," he said as Grandma began serving slices of her famous apple pie. "I was just about to make a toast." He stood, wineglass in hand, commanding the attention of the entire table with the natural confidence that had made him successful in business. "I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It means the world to have family and friends gathered around our table." Our table. I glanced at Grandma, who continued serving pie with practiced grace, but I caught the pause in her movements. This year has been incredible for the Carter family. Business is booming, Evan's excelling in college, Luke's got early acceptance letters coming in. We've been truly blessed. He raised his glass higher, and the guests began reaching for their own. So here's to family, to tradition, and to many more years of... Daniel. Grandma's voice cut through his speech, quiet but unmistakable. She had straightened up from serving pie, the server still in her hand, and was looking directly at him. The room went silent. In all my years of family dinners, I had never heard Grandma interrupt Dad. Ever. The guests looked between them, uncertainly, sensing a shift in the evening's energy. Dad's smile faltered slightly. "Mom, I know what you were doing, son." She set down the pie server and moved to stand at the other end of the table, opposite him. Her voice remained calm, but there was something different in her posture, straighter, more deliberate. "But I think it's my turn to speak." She looked around the table, making eye contact with each guest, each family member. When her gaze found mine, I saw not the tired woman from the kitchen, but someone I'd never fully recognized before. Someone who had been waiting, planning, choosing her moment. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It's been wonderful having you in my home." She paused, and I noticed her emphasis on the word my. "I'm proud of this family, proud of the life we've built together, but there are some things that need to be said."
Dad opened his mouth to speak, but something in her expression stopped him. The silence stretched taut as a wire, and I found myself holding my breath. 43 years, she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. 43 years I've been hosting Christmas dinner in this house. Grandma stood perfectly still at the end of the table, her hands folded in front of her like she was about to deliver a sermon. The dining room had gone so quiet I could hear the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. 43 years of Christmas dinners, she repeated, her voice clear and steady. 43 years of cooking, cleaning, serving, and smiling while everyone else enjoyed the fruits of my labor. I've served this meal to hundreds of people over the decades, and not once have I been invited to sit down and eat it while it was still warm. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, what are you—" "I'm not finished, Daniel." Her voice didn't rise, but there was steel in it that silenced him immediately. "I want everyone here to understand something. This family's success didn't happen in a vacuum. When your father started Carter Construction, I sold my wedding ring, the only thing of value I had left after your grandfather died, to help him buy his first truck." The color drained from Dad's face. Several guests glanced between them awkwardly, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. "Over the years, I've contributed more than $60,000 of my own savings to this family. Money I earned running a small catering business out of this very kitchen. Money that paid for down payments, business equipment, and college tuition. Money I gave freely, without contracts or IOUs, because that's what family does." Uncle Rick set down his wineglass with a soft clink that seemed to echo in the silence. "But here's what's going to change." Grandma's voice grew stronger, more confident. "I'm selling this house. The papers were signed last week. The new owners take possession in March." Gasps rose around the table. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's face had gone from pale to red. "I'm 78 years old, and I'm done being the unpaid help at my own dinner table. I'm taking my savings, the money I've been putting aside for 15 years, and I'm going to do something I've dreamed about since I was a young woman. I'm going to travel. I'm going to see Europe, visit those little cafes in Paris I've read about, take cooking classes in Italy." She looked directly at Dad, her expression serene but unwavering. "And I'm never hosting another family dinner where I'm expected to serve everyone else and eat alone in the kitchen afterward. If you want family gatherings, Daniel, you'll have to learn to cook them yourself." The silence that followed was deafening. Aunt May's fork clattered against her plate. Pastor Williams stared down at his hands. And Dad looked like he'd been slapped. "You can't be serious," he finally whispered. Grandma smiled, and for the first time all evening it reached her eyes completely. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity before Dad found his voice, though it came out strangled and higher than usual. "Mom, He looked around the table at the stunned faces of their guests, his cheeks burning red. "You're embarrassing yourself, and embarrassing me in front of everyone." "You're embarrassing me?" Her voice remained calm, but I could see fire flickering behind her eyes. "Daniel, I've spent 43 years making sure you never felt embarrassed, making sure your house was perfect, your meals were flawless, your reputation in this community was spotless. You're overreacting. You're making this into something it's not." Dad's voice grew louder, more defensive. "Everything I've accomplished, I've worked for. I built my business from nothing." "From nothing?" The words came out sharp as glass. "You built it from my wedding ring, Daniel, from my savings account, from 3 years of unpaid bookkeeping and countless meals I cooked for your clients." Pastor Williams cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps this is a family matter that should be discussed privately." "No." Grandma held up her hand. "I want everyone here to witness this conversation. I want them to understand that what they've seen tonight, me cooking alone, serving alone, cleaning up alone, while everyone else enjoys themselves, this isn't hospitality. This is 50 years of being taken for granted." Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses jump. "This is ridiculous. You're ruining Christmas over nothing, over a stupid joke about baking pies." That's when something inside me snapped. It wasn't nothing. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Dad, she's been working since dawn. She made this entire meal by herself, and instead of thanking her, instead of asking her to sit down with her own family, you made a joke about how she's good for something." "Evan," Dad's voice held a warning. "No, I'm not done." My heart was pounding, but Luke caught my eye and nodded slightly, giving me strength. "Grandma just told us she gave you $60,000. $60,000! And you act like you don't owe her basic respect. She's family. She's supposed to help family." "Help, yes. Be your unpaid servant? No." I looked around the table at the uncomfortable faces. Everyone here has been complimenting the food, the house, the hospitality. But none of you offered to help her serve it. None of you insisted she sit down and enjoy her own dinner. Luke stood up beside me, his voice quiet but clear. "Evan's right. This isn't fair, Dad. It's never been fair." Mom finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel, maybe we should listen to..." "Listen to what? To her throwing a tantrum because she didn't get enough attention?" Dad's face was purple now. "She's lost her mind." Grandma straightened to her full height, and when she spoke, her voice cut through his bluster like a blade. "The only thing I've lost, Daniel, is my willingness to pretend this is normal." I woke to sunlight streaming through the guest room window and the sound of coffee brewing downstairs. The house felt different somehow, lighter, like a storm had passed and left clear skies in its wake. The events of last night came flooding back, the guests awkwardly shuffling out after Grandma's announcement, Dad stomping off to his room without another word, Mom trying to desperately smooth things over with apologies that fell flat. I found Grandma in the kitchen, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual apron. She was sitting at the small breakfast table by the window, a steaming mug in her hands, and a stack of travel brochures spread out before her. "Morning, honey." She looked up with a smile that seemed years younger than the woman who had served dinner last night. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I expected." I poured myself coffee and sat across from her, noticing the brochures featured images of European cafes, Italian cooking schools, and scenic train routes. These look amazing. I've been collecting them for 2 years, she said, her eyes bright with excitement. I always told myself, someday. Well, someday is here. The kitchen door creaked, and Luke appeared, his hair still messy from sleep. Morning. Did Dad leave already? About an hour ago. Said he had business to attend to. She didn't sound hurt by his absence, just matter of fact. Luke slumped into a chair beside me. He was pretty angry. He'll come around, or he won't. But that's his choice to make. I've spent too many years worrying about managing other people's emotions. I reached across the table and touched her hand. Grandma, what you did last night, standing up for yourself like that, I'm proud of you. Her eyes grew soft. Thank you, Evan. That means more to me than you know. You standing up for me, the way you did, your grandfather would have been proud of us both. When do you leave for Europe? Luke asked, picking up a brochure featuring the Swiss Alps. April. I'm starting in London, then making my way through France and Italy, maybe Spain if I'm feeling adventurous. She chuckled. At my age, everything's an adventure. Can we visit you? I asked. I mean, if you want us to. I'd love that. Both of you. She squeezed my hand. In fact, I'm counting on it. I'm going to need someone to help me figure out all those European train schedules. Luke grinned. I can help you pack when the time comes. Make sure you take everything important. You know what? Grandma looked around the familiar kitchen, then back to us. I think I already have everything important right here. Outside, snow began falling again, soft and gentle, covering the fields where I'd played as a child. But inside, in the warm kitchen that had always been the heart of this house, something new was beginning. Something that looked a lot like freedom.
Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.